Every day I wake up and I have multiple questions sitting on my mind. How does one start a sweatshop? I don't know. I've never owned one. I feel like, do you go to orphanage? Do you gather up kids? Because, that sounds very messed up, but they have to figure this out. Or maybe it's just they in the culture, they tell kids, hey, you gotta go to the sweatshop. You're 6 years old. You better start making iPhones. These are questions that launder in my mind 24/7. But a question I do not have is where the game Vanquish came from. Well, you see, Shinji Mikami over in Japan had just started his own studio, but that same year he was also taking contract work, and he took some contract work with Platinum Games. Shinji Mikami is a weird choice for this. I always thought it was, and when I'm playing this game, it's sometimes very hard for me to picture the man himself, the god of Resident Evil, the king of the evil within. He is a horror game mastermind, and for him to slide into the DMs of Platinum Games, the people behind Metal Gear Rising, Bayonetta, and action game company, and be like, hey, you up, homie? Let's get to slapping some cheeks. And they decide to make a brilliantly beautiful playing game. Basically, Shinji Mikami was like, alright, have you played Max Payne? And they're like, well, yeah, it's a pretty good game. You're a detective. And shut up! None of that matters. We're going to take some aspects from Max Payne. Okay. And then we're going to take some, oh, you've heard of Gears of War? Well, this is basically Gears of War with robots. Oh, but wait, you think it's going to play slow? We'll slap my penis in your mouth and start a sucking, because this isn't going to be slow, because he has Iron Man suit, except for he only can, slide. That's right, he can slide everywhere. And that's weird. It is weird to me that he is the mastermind behind this game, when this game has zero, and I'm saying zero horror aspects at all to it whatsoever. And yes, I do know he created God Hand, which I haven't played, so I have no actual prior knowledge of it, so I don't know if there's any horror elements to it, but it seems like a lot of games he has his hand in have some horror elements, not to mention that he is mainly known for being a horror creator. So the fact that he does this weird sci-fi run-and-gun shooter with slow motion elements and cover mechanics, just like a combination of Resident Evil and Max Payne, it's still a very interesting thing that he was behind it, and I feel like it could be shoved under the rug when talking about this game, but I'm not shoving shit under a rug, baby. I'm putting it out in the open. I'm exposing myself to you in a way that Minecraft YouTubers don't understand, by just telling you things and not actually showing you my genitals. And when I tell ya that this game starts off with a bang, just know I'm telling you mighty facts. Facts from the unknown, facts that not even your parents can tell, because I'm sure your parents told you were going to be something that mattered, and when in all reality you don't. This game truly does start off with a bang. A giant gun blows San Francisco off the map. That's right, making the United States better as a whole. I'm just kidding. No one should ever blow up a city in the US and not expect some retribution. But before we get to the retribution and the mighty arm of the US military, we need to talk about how great of a setting this actually is. How great this opening cinematic tickled the tip of my wee-wee, because it's amazing. I really love the atmosphere, showing the kids with their parents, showing everybody just oh, I'm in America, I'm having a good time, this is nice, and then them just dying. This guy gets crushed with a rock, his arm's sticking out. This one dude's getting infected with AIDS in the exact moment that the laser touches down, and it almost feels like it's going to become a zombie game, which would be in line with Shinji Mikami, but they're not turning into zombies, they're just melting. They're melting from the inside. That is a crazy chemical weapon. If I was gonna get hit with a blast, some sort of end-all be-all attack from another country, I would hope that it would just vaporize me immediately. I do not want to be cooked from the inside like I'm a goddamn microwave. I'm not a motherfucking Tostino's pizza roll, baby. I am a human, and I do not want to have my insides turned into hot molten marinara sauce. And who could put these horrors upon the world, you might ask? Who is the evil behind it all? Well, of course, it's the Russians. Obviously, it's always the fucking Russians. Every time a game has like another country as a bad guy, well, they can't go with anybody that we don't know. No, it's gotta be the Russians. The Russians are behind it all. And of course, in this game, who do you think is the US president? That's right, Hillary Clinton. It's not really Hillary Clinton, but like, if I were to say she reminds me of a certain political figure. Yeah, she reminds me of Hillary Clinton. And this is like a twink version of Vladimir Putin. Like, absolutely, 100%. He's like, oh, I come and attack your USA. Oh, your USA is so weak. I take out San Francisco. And she's like, I'm Hillary Clinton. I'm a bitch. And right away, she gives me, like, those vibes. And if you're one of those people that are probably in my comments and you're like, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have been that bad, shut up. Have you seen the evil behind those eyes? And then I know that somebody else can be like, well, Donald Trump is just as bad. I don't care about politics. All I know is when I look into the eyes of Hillary Clinton, I see a vengeful, vindictive, bitch. And I do not like her. And I feel like this game would have been the perfect portrayal of what her presidency would have looked like. Minus the space battles and like, I don't know. Actually, it's kind of nonsensical for me to actually say Hillary Clinton's presidency would have looked like this. But I feel like she would have been up to some like wacky fucked up shit. I don't know. I just don't trust politicians in the slightest. And that goes for all of them, left, right, I don't care. I just don't like politics. But I do like that she looks like a bitch of a person that is Hillary Clinton. And then she kind of sucks. And it's funny that her face style jumps over, and anybody with that annoyingly, like, it almost looks like all those type of people that are like creepy like Hillary and the president in this game look like they took a bite out of a fucking lemon. Always. It's like instead of using a old Zimbabwe, no, they cut off a piece of lemon and shove that into their lip. Have an upper decky of fucking just straight citric acid. And now they're just fully angry all the time with a perked butthole. Speaking on perked buttholes, let's talk about your commanding officer. This jabroni right here. Well, not this guy. This guy's who you're playing as. But the big guy you saw before. It's sometimes really difficult to understand which one's which because they both talk like this. Listen here, we're gonna get some shit done. And then he's like, yeah, we're gonna get some shit done. They both talk like they're fucking gargling like sand. They're gargling tons and tons of sand, and that's how they talk, which is cool, by the way. And the one guy's always smoking cigarettes, which is such a cool thing for a character. I know cigarettes aren't really based. They're bad for you, whatever. I don't care, but they look cool, goddammit. The one thing I do have to say right off the bat with the beginning of this game is it pulls a lot of themes from Gears of War, which I kind of mentioned with this being a hybrid of Max Payne, Gears of War, and Iron Man, but it pulls a lot of themes with the giant invasion, except for it's in space now and not dealing with underground mutants. It has a lot of similarities. You have the nice people eating breakfast only to have their world turn the fuck upside down and all die. It has a lot of those same things carrying over, especially in the early game. Not to mention that your commanding officer is this weirdly, unrealistically big human. I mean, every time I hear the argument about like body images and unrealistic bodies bullshit when it comes to women, I look at games like this where the dude's like 50 times the normal size of a regular man. I mean, Brian Shaw would be like, damn, bruh, how much do you lift? And then I think the argument's fucking stupid because these type of guys are still in games. But you give a chick big breasts. Oh no, unrealistic body imagery. Fuck off, dude. So stupid. I don't think we should be like limiting creators in any sense. If you want to make a guy look like the Incredible Hulk and say he's not on roids, cool. If you want to make a chick look like she has natural tits, but they're bigger than any realistic human with natural tits, go ahead, I don't care. It's the dream of the creator that I care about. And if he dreams about being surrounded by giant men of unrealistic proportions, sure. Cool, I'm down for it. If he's imagining giant, big-ass, big-titty women with weirdly small waists, cool, that's fine, I don't care. I do think we've gotten to a goofy state in the world. But that's enough of that I'll talk about today. I want to get back to this game. Right away when you get on the ship, shit starts to go ham, hard as a motherfucker. Instantly caught into the midst of a bukkake of robots and gunfire, and you have to destroy them all using all the tools at your disposal at any time. And right away you learn how to kind of dash around using your little jetpack shit, and you can also use it for your like slow motion, which are combined to the same power meter, which I think is cool because it really makes you plan your steps out in advance. Otherwise you're stuck in like a cover shooter scenario because you don't have enough saved up energy to really amplify the fight the way you want to. So you have to be tactical about your situations. And when it comes to like people and turrets and stuff, some of those are the best opportunities to where you're like, oh shit, it's time to use some dash and slow-mo and really take them out of the fight. Take the fight to them, and I love the ability to kind of slide up on them and then slow down time. I think it's amazing. I wish more games did this. It's crazy that we, in 2024, don't have a game that truly embodies awesome third-person action as well as this game did, and this game came out on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3. The way you play this game and at the velocity you play it is so cool. Not to mention all of the different mechanics and tools this game gives you every second of this playthrough, and how you're constantly rifling through them. This shit's like the Doom Eternal of third-person over-the-shoulder shooters. I will easily stand behind that, and it's fucking amazing that a game with this good of gameplay exists in the first place, and I wish there were more of them. That being said, let's get to the story, which I think is kind of the weaker element of this game. Not that it's a bad story, I just feel like it doesn't get to the point very fast. I mean, even in these opening sections, you have this giant evil Russian guy you're trying to attack. You get on this spaceship that's basically like its own little city in the sky, right? But you really don't feel like you're in a city in the sky. You just feel like you're on a typical spaceship in a typical sci-fi game. So when you're looking at the actual environmental storytelling, I feel like it's very, very weak. So you're waiting for these cutscenes, which the cutscenes don't really seem to give you anything other than, oh, big thing coming at you, you better fucking attack it. And that's kind of what this early section kind of feels like. Big thing is coming, attack it. Oh, look, you got a cool main character. He's smoking a cigarette, fucking flicks it down because I'm too cool. He loads up his fucking Iron Man suit, and then you go into the action. And I do appreciate this here. I do appreciate that the game, when it shows an action scenario is about to go down, it just hands you the controls. Because there's so many games, and I'm looking at you, Darkness, but there's so many games out there that will actually take and show the cool stuff in the cutscene, and then when you actually get the controls of the game, you feel like you're never as cool as what's happening in the cutscene. This game's the opposite. You're always doing cool shit 24/7, and I appreciate this so much. But when the game's environmental storytelling is gray and yellow backgrounds and big robot, it's kind of a little bit of a downgrade in terms of how much time they put into this actual gameplay. Because like I said, this is probably one of the best playing games I have ever touched in my entire fucking life. And this story does have some good things that we'll get to, but in the early sections, it just seemed to have fucking nothing other than start mission, kill bad guys, fight boss. I did have a moment early on with this game too that I thought that the bosses had way too much health, but then I kind of realized that the bosses work in a very similar way to the old Resident Evil games. What you have to do is you have to hit their weak spots, then you have to attack the bigger weak spot to drain the enemy's health a little faster, and then you get a QTE, which I think the way this game actually handles that, and once you get a good vibe for how to do that, it becomes fucking incredible. Because the game's forcing you to use those pre-mentioned mechanics that I've been talking about to your advantage, and then act to overcome the obstacle in front of you. I think that it ends up becoming this almost symphony of gameplay mechanics in a showcase in these boss fights, and I really have to tip my hat to that, because other games that I've played that have done that, such as like the Souls games, are really, really inspiring to me, that a game can build a boss around the gameplay, which is so important, because so many games will build a boss because it looks cool or it seems fucking cool, and then forget about the gameplay mechanics to it and just give it a big fucking health bar. And this game really doesn't do that, so I have to appreciate that, because each moment and each enemy really really makes you think about them, really makes you maneuver your own. It's like a giant chess field, except for you're on steroids and cocaine, and you have to move around the chessboard at 1,500 miles per hour. So the ability to do that, and also to have enemies that you can control and can control your movements around them, super genius, super fucking based, and that is something I love. I just wish that the environments would kind of back up these aspects. Not that the actual level design doesn't, but when you're looking around and you're seeing the same gray shit for like half of this fucking game, it kind of wears on you. You get to a point where you're like, I would love to see some little bit of a variety, maybe. I don't know. I just felt like at a certain point in this early stage, I just felt like I was doing the same shit over and over again, and it never felt that way with the gameplay, so it has to be the actual biomes of the areas. And I know I said that the enemies are perfectly designed for the gameplay mechanics, but when it comes to the enemy design themselves, I don't think that it really hit the spot for me. It didn't push up into my butt and give me that G-spot. It's not slipping a finger in when I'm going hard in missionary. It's just kind of existing. And existing isn't a bad thing. It's not like I'm upset or I didn't enjoy the enemy designs. I just felt like they were kind of generic. They were generic robot enemies. Oh, bigger robot enemy. Ooh, spider robot enemy. And once you've seen about halfway through this game, it's almost that you've seen every single enemy style you will see from here on out. And again, that's not a bad game. I've played a million games in my day that have very similar enemy design, and I'm okay with it. I think the big problem here goes back to what I was saying with the lack of diversity in biomes, and how the enemies almost blend into the biome themselves, because everything has this very mechanical sci-fi aesthetic, and then you're fighting enemies that have a very similar color scheme to the sci-fi aesthetic, so they almost blend in and make themselves almost unmemorable. And it might just be because you feel like you're just kind of here to destroy robots. That might be another issue with the kind of repetitiveness of the enemies themselves, is because what you're doing is kind of repetitive, because most of this story is just, they have your scientist guy, they're gonna blow up another city, you need to get in there and shut this giant laser weapon of mass destruction down, and it's not really giving you a whole lot other than that for a very long time, so you're just kind of mindlessly destroying enemies with very little context. Yes, you just saw a giant city to get destroyed, but when you're really not getting much else and it's just like pointing you in a direction and saying shoot, at a certain point you're like, well, I'd really like to know what's going on, or is this the actual game? And that kind of sucks that you're stuck in this position, when I think that when this game's story does ramp up, it is very good. It just takes so fucking long to get there. To me, it almost feels like padding once I finish the game and look back on it. This whole section, I was like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, they gave me a great arsenal of weapons to work with. They gave me a bunch of great mechanics to play with. It all slaps as much clit as they possibly can, but you're not really doing anything other than progressing a little bit further. And I need a little bit more substance, especially when I know somebody of Shinji Mikami's expertise has the ability to do so, and it just feels like a missed opportunity early on. And it all really embodies itself in this boss fight you're about to witness here, because yes, this is the first boss fight I fought, and shocker, it's not just the only thing you're fighting is the same boss over again. But no, they're gonna throw a second one in there in the later stage of the boss fight when it turns into the spider, or wait, well, maybe it was the other way around. I don't remember. All I know is it's the same boss, just doubled, and I fucking hate when games do that. I feel like it's a waste of my time. It feels like I got through all this cool shit, and now I'm just fighting two of the first boss over again, but in their different variations, and now they only have one stage. So instead of fighting one boss with two very unique stages, you're fighting his very unique stages at the same time, which should feel different, but it doesn't. It just feels like I'm fighting the same boss over again, but faster, if that makes sense. I don't know, I really wasn't about this. I did have fun with it. It is a very fun experience because it keeps you on your toes a little bit more because you have two enemies attacking you at the same time instead of one. But at the end of the day, it's not very much imagination goes into taking a boss fight, splitting it in half, and then doubling or putting them both on the field. I don't know. It kind of embodies this whole first area of the game and how it feels kind of repetitive because it almost feels like it just copy and pasted itself a couple times when it comes to environment, it comes to enemy design, and it comes to boss fights. I want to preface here that this isn't a bad thing. It's not awful. It's just a critique. I still had fun with this whole section. I still was enjoying myself. There wasn't a moment where in a lot of games I'll just turn the fucker off and be like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go jerk off to some porn or something because that's more interesting and that's a more enjoyable repeating scenario. No, it wasn't that bad, but it was something I took note of in my mind. It was something that I was like, okay, we need to kind of get past this. It's time to move on a little bit. Let's hit me with some fucking variety. And thankfully the game starts to do this after this little cutscene here, and I have to say that the character development I find very intriguing in this game. It's not better than anything I've ever seen, but I do find it interesting. Like the sexy ass like assistant lady you have, she's kind of has like this little vibe because it's kind of flirtatious thing going on with you, and I really like that. Your commanding officer kind of seems like a by the numbers, I do what the government tells me to do type of guy, but still has a moral compass. I find their dynamic incredibly intriguing, and I wish there was a little bit more done with it. Like I said earlier, it feels like they just kind of are thrown in for a little bit just for you to get a little fucking taste, just for you to edge just a little bit to it, and other than that, you're back to mindlessly fighting the robots that you've already fought a million times. But again, you never feel like this is really that bad. Other games, I 100% would hate this. This game, I felt like even with the variety that they do give you there's enough variety in the types of enemies, even though I don't think their enemy design is that varied from the environments. I do think that there's enough enemy variety to keep the game pushing forward. And like I said, when it's not repeating enemies and it's throwing new stuff in your face, it is so much fun to deal with them. And the fact that you have like this arsenal that you're constantly switching through and trying to prioritize different weapons that have different functions, and some you gotta get closer for, some that you wanna sit back and take a more fucking Gears of War approach. I love this constant combat loop, so more of these levels is not a bad thing. I just wish I got the character development that I was so yearning for at this point. It really felt like I wasn't getting the character development I needed, and I was getting all the action that I wanted. And I never want a game to have less action, so this is where I'm so contradicting myself on my feelings of the game up until this point. Because, one, I'm having a fucking fun time doing it. I'm having so much fun killing these enemies. But on the other hand, the environments are getting kind of repetitive. And I don't really get the story that the game feels like it wants to tell me, and it's not. So I'm constantly at odds with myself, and that kind of hurts because I feel like this game has so much potential to be fucking amazingly perfect, and at the moment I'm at right now, it's just kind of almost, it's like an 8 out of 10, you know, and it should be a 10 out of 10 easily, and it hurts me that it's in that situation. But after I defeat this giant colossal of a building laser thing, I finally get some answers that I've been so fucking hungry for, or at least some story. I get some story in general, and basically what happens is I find out old fucking Hillary Clinton over here has been colluding with the Russians, which is so fucking funny because I think Hillary did do some colluding with the Russians. I don't know. I remember reading an article about that. I'm not a political guy. I just think it's funny that Hillary Clinton's colluding with the Russians here, and her whole plan was to start a proxy war with Russia so that the U.S. would have, make money off war. It's just the whole, I'm going to go there, I'm going to fight you, it's going to boost both of our economies, and then we're going to end the war type shit. That was the goal. But the Russian guy was like, fuck it, I'm going to take it a step forward, and I'm going to blow up San Francisco. And now she's all pissed off about that. But she's still a snake in fucking people's clothing that was fully willing to jeopardize American lives in order to boost her own selfish needs, which I hate politicians, and this is the perfect embodiment of like a politician in this game. And I just love the characterization they did of her in particular. And like I said, I have no problems with the characters they created in this game, the story they're telling. I just think the pacing was a bit weird, and we'll get to exactly why a little later. But let's get on to this new environment we're finally blessed with. It starts to get a little bit more greener around. We're finally on the actual civilization parts of this giant space warhead. It feels like it's a city on the space warhead, but there's no real people living there. It's just a bunch of robots. So I don't understand why they put all the trees and stuff. And if you were gonna go this evil civilization of like militants on this thing, why didn't you throw in some like soldiers for me to fight or something? It's some weird choices like that where I almost feel like they really locked down the style of game they wanted to create and the gameplay, and push out a decent story only to then kind of be running out of time and throw together what they had here. And I think that's the main thing that is fighting with me here, is the game almost feels like it had so much more to tell and decided to pull back the reins a little bit. Because when this game knows what it's doing, it knows what it's fucking doing. Hardcore. Like, there's this boss fight that you're watching right now on screen where you're fighting this thing called the Unknown, and it's almost like you're fighting it in a giant cage match where you're like using the fucking crates in the middle of the area to build some space between you and the enemy, and constantly rotating around the map and staying ahead of its like insta-kill laser. It's so cool. It's such a well-made boss fight, and there is so many moments of this in this game, and this game fucking accelerates its amazing gameplay, its amazing boss fights, and it keeps you engaged to the point that you don't want to put the controller down, that you just want to keep playing this game. Regardless of any of these little critiques you could be forming in your head about the things that I've already mentioned, at the end of the day, this game needs to be played by everyone because of the fact that in pure gameplay, it is one of the most spectacular things I have ever played. And when it does have some very level design and some environmental storytelling, this game really fucking takes it up a notch. This one section where I'm running through this little area shooting enemies while trying to get my way up to this power core, and I'm waiting for like this blaster to fly off to progress to the next area, and at any moment I could be destroyed by this giant laser, so I have to like time it perfectly. This is cool. This is stuff that if they would have had this throughout the whole game, this would be a fucking endless masterpiece. This would be a game that if you had found somebody who hadn't played, you'd be like, bro, you're missing out on one of the greatest gaming experiences of all time. But instead of this being like a core thing of the game, it's almost like a fleeting moment. It's a fucking shooting star across the sky, and then you're back to doing the same things you were doing before, which again is amazing, and you're having fun with it. But if you're gonna critique other games for having this repetition, I have to look at this game and say, yeah, it has a lot of those same faults that a lot of games that fall flat on their asses have, but this game just does it better because it's just a fucking well-made game. It just sucks that they didn't take these moments that are so good in this game and then sprinkle them throughout the whole game. And it sucks that they didn't take these story beats that are fucking amazing in this game and like build it throughout the entire game. Instead, you just feel like you're just fucking point A to point B, point A to point B, point A to point B. And don't get me wrong, I understand why the enemies are pretty similar and you do fight them over again, because of the way you learn how to fight that enemy is very different than a lot of games, and how you can really boil how to fight a boss down to a science and then go from taking like 6 minutes to beat them to beating them in like less than a minute. I do enjoy that fact of this game, don't get me wrong. I just feel like stylistically this game could have done so much more and been so much of a more of a brighter star, when as it sits now, it just is a decently good star that can power a galaxy. And nothing embodies my point better than when you actually do get a fight in some of these green treed areas. It's so refreshing, but it feels like such a short moment in this game. It's only one level like this, and then you go back to the exact same level design, I feel like that's so criminal, because this was my favorite section of the game because it stands to contrast everything else in the game, and it would have been nice to kind of really explore how this different sustainable weapon in space has these different authentic areas instead of just fighting on the same spaceship floor all the time. It really shows that this game could have had more variety, but just didn't. Because right after this, you go right back to the same road/tech aesthetic, gray surroundings, fighting the same enemies. And to me, that kind of sucks because I don't know, it was just such a different environment, and to only play it for a very short moment in time, then to go back to the same aesthetic you were already in, feels kind of like a cop-out, and almost like it was a cock tease. It was a fucking cock tease, and that's really not fair. Before I get to the main story points that we'll end this video on, I do want to highlight one enemy that you fight a couple times that I think is just fucking amazing. It's this guy called the Crystal Viper, and I love this enemy, and I wanted them to do more with stuff like this. When you see this guy, looks like the fucking Silver Surfer. He's just so different than all the other very robot-style enemies you're fighting. He feels like this pinnacle of technology, and I felt like that was a perfect step forward in enemy story design, because enemies can tell a story of progression as well, and this guy does that perfectly. It kind of sucks that we don't get more of him. We do fight him like one more time in this, but I love how much of an impact this had in the game, and how it sends ripple effects through the world, and there was just so much going on here. I wish we would have gotten a ton more of this type of enemy in these type of moments. Thankfully, the game does have an uptake here, because when the Master and Queef shows up, she basically tells the war leader guy, the general, that, hey man, well, we need to have this war so it pulls us out of a recession. And he's like, you think that'll really work? She's like, well, all of our sacrifices have to mean something, so go fucking bring a means to an end. And he follows the rules, because that's the kind of guy he is. At the end of the day, is he's a ask question later type soldier. He's a soldier first, goddammit. Hoorah! And this is exactly the type of shit that I was hungry for, that I'm willing to crawl on all fours and just suck up off the floor, because to me, this ends justifies the means type stuff is going to create a good narrative. I'm going to be involved. I wish that this whole thing was dealing with this, because very next scene you get is you finally get to the scientist who created your suit, who's been kidnapped, and he's basically like, we need to destroy this, and there's a ploy, and he starts to unravel Pandora's box. And I'm sorry, Pandora's not that hot. We shouldn't be diving into her box. But anyways, he ends up getting just fucking blasted, bro. He's taking all sorts of shots, and not the kind that make money at the end of a porno, but the kind that leave you in a pine box, baby. Oh, Max Payne Iron Man here, he's upset because he follows the beat of his own drum. He is a guy who will follow his morality to the end of the earth. And that's kind of how things should be. You shouldn't always follow orders, especially if you're asked to do something highly illegal. That is in the bylines to not break like the Geneva Convention and shit. And this definitely breaks the Geneva Convention. Not all ends justify the means, especially when it comes to sacrificing entire cities in order to pull you out of recession. So obviously you're gonna fight against this general. And this boss fight is incredibly fun. It takes you to different environments, and it keeps you on your toes in a way that's really intelligent. It's not just dragging the boss fight out with too much health, or your attacks aren't doing damage so that you can get dialogue lines out. It's actually placed out enough to where you feel like you have to take cover and you have to move around enough and attack him from different angles to slowly break his health down to have your final end-all be-all against him. And I think it was a very well-laid boss fight, and the fact that you're going to different environments instead of fighting different stage is something that I don't see done in a lot of games, and I appreciate the way it was done in this game. And by no means is this my favorite boss fight in the game overall, but I do think it is the most impactful to the story, because throughout this story you've kind of grown a bit of admiration for this general, only to find out that he's willing to toe whatever lines necessary to still be the soldier he thinks he is in his mind. And when you do finally get to the end of this boss fight and take him down, it's only then that he realizes the error of his ways, which I think is very incredible for a character. It's always good if you have a character learn their big lesson in a story, only to then try to make up for it. And he really does right here, because all sorts of soldiers storm in like they're gonna gangbang you from every angle, slap some dicks on your forehead, and while you're skiing down a hill. But you also have this moment where you feel like it's all fucked, but he decides he's going to help you out and kind of like leave it a final stand against his own men, because he realized what he's doing is fucking wrong, and it's not based, it's not cool, it has no riz. He needs to make things up for what he has done that was morally against his code, but he thought he was the soldier following orders first. And I really like when you send a character off in this way, because after this game, whether he lived or died, he would be dead to us. His character will not evolve anymore because there isn't any more entries, so you might as well send him off in a spectacular fashion, which they do here, and you get a really meaningful moment between these two characters, where even though they had a little bit of tension throughout the thing, they did build some admiration. And even though the general kind of backstabbed the main character, he still sees the general as a good guy overall. And now as an audience, we can share that same admiration. But right after this, you end up running to the Russian guy himself, but he's got like a twin there, and it ends up explaining why that's his. But it feels like you just went from something big like that happened, now you have another boss fight, and this game almost feels like it's ramping itself up to something spectacular. And I have to say that this final confrontation here is pretty great. The only big gripe I have with it is this doesn't feel like the end of the game to me. I feel like I just learned the entire story 5 seconds ago. I feel like there's a whole nother like 4 hours, 5 hours to this game. But in all reality, I knew deep down in my heart that this was going to be the final boss fight. Because at the end of the day, I'm still sitting here with questions. What's going to happen next? What is happening with this giant cabal? Is there going to be a war with Russia and the US? These are things that you want to know, but I'm kind of heads up. The game doesn't really tell you. And not that this last boss fight isn't fantastic. I mean, fighting 2 of these super soldiers while moving around the arena and staying on your toes is one of the most insane experiences I've had in video games, and it is truly one of the best boss fights I've ever been in. And I can't preface that enough. Trying to focus on both of them at the same time while utilizing both of your powers, and one of them will even knock your energy down to 0 if he gets close enough to hit you, so you're constantly moving around the map. Like I said, every time you get into a good boss fight in this game, it is highlighting how good the gameplay is. And this gameplay is a 15 out of 10. This is a fucking bukkake out of a cum shot, if that makes sense. This is actually amazing. And when you get into these really cool moments, and even the QTEs in this game aren't overwhelming, they're only there when it's necessary, and that's how you should do QTEs, because I never felt like they were kind of intruding on the game. I felt like they were a visual spectacular moment that I gotta chew on, that I really gotta digest, and that's something we want to do. We don't want to fucking just jump into the pussy. No, we want to eat it a little bit, numble on that clit. And when you finally do get this last moment where you take him out, it even has this really cool shooting section where he's like coming closer and you're trying to like lower your sights on top of him, and it's so freaking cool. This boss fight, 10 out of a million. Or no, a million out of 10. My bad. Look at me fucking up numbers. Look, I'm so stupid sometimes. But after you do shoot him, you then realize that this whole thing was he was just a hologram, and he had duplicated his his mind into these 2 suits. So he's still up and running. You didn't actually kill him. The threat is still there. He's still fucking out there rizzing up the entire world, and you have nothing you can do about it. And that sucks to me, because this game feels like it's setting up for a sequel and setting up for something bigger, or setting up for a whole second half of this game, and it's something you don't get. And I have looked up, this is where the game ends. This isn't a scenario like Nier Automata where you have to play the game a certain number of times to actually get the full story. No, it just kind of like ends here. You then make your run out of the spaceship. You barely make it out. You get back. You have your moment where you rizz up the hot chick that you've been talking to in the entire time of the game. And thank God, dude. You actually don't get like that cool kiss moment that you get in a lot of cinema. It's just kind of a little coy. Oh, they're starting to feel some vibes. Again, it feels like it's building to something bigger. You're getting great character development here in the last moments of the game, which, don't get me wrong, I'm very happy about. But but it never fully realizes its potential. It wasted half of this game doing nothing, only to have the second half ramp up to such a speed that it's then over. I want this to be a fucking masterpiece. But again, you can't call it a masterpiece when only half of the game tells an actual story, and the first half is just fucking like it's like you're on a first date with the girl. Everything's going great. But at the end of the night, you don't seal the deal. You wait for 4 more weeks to have another date, to then kiss her, to then 14 dates down the line finally score. And yeah, it just kind of sucks, man. It kind of sucks. And there's a cool moment here too where the president, like, unalives herself, which I'm not gonna show fully due to YouTube guidelines, but you then fight the credits like you do in a lot of games. But I always like when you get to fight the credits, it gives you a little bit more. But this is where I kind of want to wrap it up. It feels like this game had so much more area to explore. It had so much more it could do, and it only realizes that in the final moments of the game. At the end of the day, is this one of the most fun games I've ever played? Absolutely. Is it one of the most interesting concepts I've ever seen in a game? Absolutely. Is those concepts fully realized? Absolutely not. I want this game to be so much more amazing than it actually is. But as it sits right now with no sequel on the horizon, maybe by the time this video drops, there'll be like some secret news that Platinum Games has actually been plotting with the Shinji Mikami and they got a sequel on their way. And I had no way of knowing that when I actually made this video. But as it sits right now, it just feels like an underbaked concept that had so much potential to be amazing. And it lets me down because of the combat and the boss fights. And there's so much going for this game, and at the end of the day, I think this is like a solid 7 or 8 out of 10, and had the potential to be in 1,000,000 out of 10, 100 kajillion out of 10, because the combat is so great. And if it even would have like taken a sideline idea to where it wasn't trying to dive into these deeper concepts and these deeper themes like it does in the last section of the game, if it would have just took the momentum and said, hey, we're just gonna make a game that has very light story, that at the end of the game it's all solved, moving on, I would have been fine. I would have looked at this game more like a Doom Eternal, where I'm not really here for the story, but there was so much little nuggets at the beginning, and then in the second half it really pushed me to wanting more story, because the game has this ramp up, has this idea that at the end of the day it's going to be something spectacular, only to leave you wanting more and feeling like you only ate half your meal. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll catch you next week. Bye.